The winter wind howled through the streets of Millbrook like an angry beast. Snow swirled against the windows of the small shops that lined the main street, above the old bakery. In a tiny flat with thin walls and creaky floors, Emma Thompson sat at her worn kitchen table. Her fingers moved slowly as she counted the coins spread before her. £1, £2. She separated the silver from the copper, making small piles on the scratched wooden surface. The money clinked softly in the quiet room. £23.40. She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the wind outside. It was everything she had saved for Christmas. Every extra penny from working double shifts at the corner shop, every coin she had found in her coat pockets, every bit of change she had set aside instead of buying herself a proper lunch. All of it was there on the table, and it felt like nothing at all. Her daughter Lucy sat across from her, bent over a mathematics book. At 12 years old, Lucy had her father's dark hair and serious expression. She was helping her little brother Tom with his sums, speaking in patient whispers. If you have 10 apples and give away 3, how many do you have left? Lucy asked. 7, Tom announced proudly. He was 8 years old with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile that reminded Emma so much of his father that it sometimes took her breath away. Emma watched her children working together and felt her heart grow heavy in her chest. This would be their first Christmas without David. He had died in the spring when the daffodils were blooming in the small garden behind their building. The doctors said his heart had simply stopped working. One day, he was there, laughing at Tom's silly jokes and helping Lucy with her reading. The next day, he was gone. Emma had been working as many hours as she could find ever since. She cleaned offices in the early morning before the children woke up. Then she worked at Mrs. Miller's shop during the day while the children were at school. In the evenings, she cleaned more offices after tucking the children into bed. But no matter how hard she worked, there never seemed to be quite enough money for everything they needed. The wind outside grew stronger, rattling the old windows. Emma had been saving the money on the table for weeks, hoping to buy a small Christmas tree and maybe a few simple presents for Lucy and Tom. She knew it would not be much, but she wanted to make Christmas feel special for them. They had been through so much sadness already. Suddenly, the lights in their small kitchen began to flicker. Once, twice. Then everything went dark. "Mom, what happened?" Tom's voice came through the darkness. Small and worried, Emma felt round the table until she found the box of matches they kept for emergencies. She struck one, and the tiny flame pushed back the darkness just a little. "Just a power cut, love," she said, trying to keep her voice calm and steady. "The storm has knocked down some electrical lines, I expect." She found the thick white candle they kept on the windowsill and lit it carefully. The warm yellow light filled their small kitchen, making shadows dance on the walls. It was not very bright, but it was enough to see each other's faces through the thin walls of their building. They could hear Mrs. Davies from the flat below talking loudly on her telephone. She was calling the electricity company, her voice sharp with frustration. "Yes, the whole building is out," Mrs. Davies was saying. "When will it be fixed?" "What do you mean you don't know?" Emma's stomach dropped as she listened. She looked down at the money scattered on the table. If the power was out for more than a day, she would need to buy extra blankets to keep them warm. She might need to buy food that did not need cooking. The money she had saved for a Christmas would have to be spent on keeping them safe and fed instead. Tom shivered in his chair. Their flat was already growing cold without the electric heater. "Come on. You too," Emma said softly. "Let's get ready for bed. We'll be warmer under the covers." She helped them brush their teeth using water from a jug, since the electric pump that brought water to their floor was not working either. They put on their warmest pajamas and extra socks. Emma tucked them into the bed they shared in the small bedroom. Lucy looked up at her mother in the candlelight. Her young face was serious and worried. "Mum," she whispered so Tom could not hear, "will we still have Christmas this year?" Emma's heart broke a little at the question. She sat on the edge of the bed and smoothed Lucy's dark hair away from her face. She kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in the sweet smell of her shampoo. "Of course we will, sweetheart," Emma whispered back. "Christmas isn't about what we have under a tree. It's about being together and loving each other." Tom was already asleep, curled up like a small animal under the thick blankets. Lucy nodded and closed her eyes, trusting her mother's words completely. Emma took the candle and went back to the living room. She sat on their old sofa and looked at the empty corner where she had planned to put their Christmas tree. The corner looked bigger and more empty in the flickering candlelight. Outside, the storm continued to rage, and Emma wondered how she would make Christmas special for her children with no money left at all. 3 days before Christmas, the lights came back on in their small flat above the bakery. Emma flipped the switch in the kitchen and felt relief wash over her as the room filled with warm yellow light. The power had been out for 2 whole days, and those had been the longest 2 days of her life. But her relief quickly turned to worry when she looked at her empty purse. Every single coin she had saved for a Christmas was gone. She had spent it all on the candles when the power went out. She had bought extra blankets from the charity shop when their flat became too cold. She had purchased tins of beans and soup that they could eat without cooking when their electric cooker stopped working. Now the power was back, but Emma's Christmas money had disappeared like snow in the sun. Tom stood at their living room window, his small hands pressed against the cold glass. His breath made little clouds on the window as he watched the street below. Across the road, Mr. Jenkins was struggling to carry a huge Christmas tree through his front door. The tree was so big that green branches stuck out on both sides, and Mrs. Jenkins had to help push it from behind. "Look, Mom," Tom called excitedly. "Mr. Jenkins got a big one this year. It's even bigger than last year's tree." Emma walked over to stand behind her son. She watched as the Jenkins family disappeared into their house with their beautiful tree. Through their window, she could see them setting it up in their warm, bright living room. Soon they would cover it with sparkling lights and colorful ornaments that they had collected over many years of happy Christmases. Emma's heart felt like it was breaking as she watched Tom's face. His eyes were wide with wonder as he imagined how beautiful the tree would look when it was decorated. She knew he was remembering last Christmas, when his father had brought home a perfect tree, and they had spent the whole evening making it beautiful together. That morning, Emma had walked past the Christmas tree lot on her way to work at Mrs. Miller's shop. She had stopped to look at the trees, hoping maybe there would be something small and cheap that she could afford. But even the smallest, scrawniest trees cost £15. The nice, full trees like the one Mr. Jenkins had bought cost £40 or more. Emma had stood there in the cold morning air, looking at all those beautiful green trees, and felt completely helpless. She had no money left at all, not even enough for the smallest tree. "Mom, you look sad," Lucy said softly. Appearing beside her mother, Lucy was always watching, always noticing when something was wrong. At 12 years old, she was sometimes too grown up for her own good. Emma tried to smile, but she could feel that it was not a real smile. "I'm just thinking, sweetheart." Lucy looked round their small living room. In the corner where other families would put their Christmas trees, there was just empty space. The corner looked very bare and sad with nothing in it. "Can we make our own decorations?" Lucy asked suddenly. "I have some colored paper left from school, and I have my colored pencils." Emma felt a little spark of hope in her chest. "That's a wonderful idea, Lucy. We can make the most beautiful decorations in all of Millbrook." They spent the whole afternoon sitting round the kitchen table with scissors, paper, and pencils. Lucy was very good at drawing and cutting. She made perfect stars with 5 points and angels with flowing robes. She showed Tom how to fold the paper so his cuts would make snowflakes. Tom worked very hard with his tongue sticking out in concentration. His small fingers were not as steady as Lucy's, so his decorations were a bit wobbly. But he was very proud of each one he finished. "Look at this angel, Mum," Tom said, holding up a paper angel with uneven wings and a crooked halo. Emma looked at the angel more closely and saw that Tom had written something on it in his careful, slow handwriting. In pencil letters, he had written Daddy across the angel's chest. "It's beautiful, Tom," Emma whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Daddy would love it." Lucy used old magazines that Mrs. Davies had given them to make long chains of paper wings. She cut strips from the colorful pages and glued them together in red and green and gold loops. The chains grew longer and longer as she worked, when the afternoon light began to fade. They had made a whole box full of decorations. There were stars and angels and snowflakes. There were paper chains and cut-out Christmas trees. Tom had even made a paper star that he said was for the top of their tree, even though they did not have a tree to put it on. But when evening came and they sat in their living room looking at the empty corner, the box of homemade decorations beside them seemed very small. The silence in the room felt heavy and sad, like a thick blanket that made it hard to breathe. "I miss Dad," Tom said quietly, his voice barely louder than a whisper. "He always picked out the perfect tree. Remember how he would lift me up so I could put the star on top?" Emma felt her heart break all over again. She gathered both her children into her arms on their old sofa, holding them close against her chest. "I miss him too, my loves," she whispered into their hair. "So very, very much." Lucy looked up at her mother with serious eyes. "Mom, are you sad because we don't have enough money for a tree?" Emma's eyes filled with tears that she had been trying to hold back all day. She had worked so hard to hide her worries from her children, but Lucy was too smart and too caring not to notice. "Sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult choices," Emma said softly, her voice shaking just a little. "But what matters most is that we have each other." As they sat together in their small living room, the empty corner seemed to grow larger and larger. It seemed to fill the whole room with its emptiness. Emma looked at her two precious children and wondered if she had failed them completely in their first Christmas without their father. On the morning of December 23rd, Emma was washing the breakfast dishes when she heard a soft knock at their front door. It was not the loud, sharp knock of someone delivering a package or bringing bad news. This was a gentle tap-tap-tap, like someone who did not want to disturb anyone who might still be sleeping. Emma dried her hands on her apron and went to open the door. There stood Mrs. Davies, their elderly neighbor who lived in the flat below theirs. Mrs. Davies was a small, round woman with silver hair that she always kept neat and tidy. She was holding a white plate covered with a clean tea towel. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Davies said with a warm smile that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. "I hope I'm not disturbing you too early." "Not at all, Mrs. Davies," Emma replied, though she wondered why her neighbor had come to visit. They had always been polite to each other in the hallway, but they had never really talked much. Mrs. Davies lifted the corner of the tea towel to show what was underneath. The plate was filled with golden biscuits that smelled like butter and sugar and cinnamon. Steam was still rising from them, which meant they were fresh from the oven. "I made far too many biscuits this morning," Mrs. Davies said with a little laugh. My old eyes aren't what they used to be, and I misread the recipe. I was wondering if Lucy and Tom might help me with something. My old bones aren't what they used to be either. And I have far too many Christmas decorations for one person to manage. Emma felt her cheeks grow warm. She knew that Mrs. Davies was being kind, trying to help them without making it seem like charity. Emma had always been proud, and it was hard for her to accept help from others, even when she desperately needed it. "That's very sweet of you, Mrs. Davies," Emma said carefully. "But we wouldn't want to be a bother to you." "Oh, nonsense." Mrs. Davies waved her free hand in the air as if she was shooing away a fly. "It would be doing me the favor, truly. I have boxes and boxes of decorations that haven't seen the light of day in years. They're just sitting there gathering dust in my cupboards. It would make an old woman very happy to see them being enjoyed again." Behind Emma, she could hear the sound of small feet running across their kitchen floor. Lucy and Tom appeared in the doorway, their eyes bright with curiosity. They had heard voices and wanted to see who was visiting. "Hello, Mrs. Davies," Lucy said politely, the way Emma had taught her to greet adults. "Please, Mum," Lucy asked, looking up at Emma with hopeful eyes. "Can we help Mrs. Davies?" Tom nodded eagerly beside his sister. The smell of the fresh biscuits was making his mouth water, and the idea of seeing Christmas decorations sounded wonderful to him. Emma looked down at her children's eager faces, then at Mrs. Davies' kind smile. She realized that maybe sometimes it was okay to accept help, especially when it would make her children happy. "All right," Emma said softly, "if you're sure we won't be in your way." An hour later, Lucy and Tom were sitting on Mrs. Davies' living room floor, surrounded by more Christmas decorations than they had ever seen in their entire lives. Mrs. Davies had opened box after box, each one filled with treasures that sparkled and shone in the morning light. There were strings of tiny golden bells that tinkled when Tom touched them. There were glass ornaments in every color Emma could imagine. Deep red like winter berries, bright green like summer grass, silver like moonlight on water, and gold like sunshine. There were long ropes of tinsel that caught the light and threw it round the room like dancing stars. "Mrs. Davies, these are so beautiful," Tom exclaimed, holding up a delicate silver star that was no bigger than his palm. He turned it carefully in his small hands, watching how it sparkled. Mrs. Davies sat in her comfortable armchair, watching the children explore her treasures. Her eyes were bright and happy, and she looked younger than Emma had ever seen her look before. "My late husband Robert and I collected these over 40 years of marriage," Mrs. Davies said, her voice soft with memory. "Every year we would buy one or two new ornaments to add to our collection. But what good are decorations if they stay packed away in boxes? Christmas magic only happens when it's shared with people who can appreciate it." Lucy had found a box full of paper angels that looked like they had been made by hand many years ago. Each one was slightly different, and they were yellow with age. But they were still beautiful. "Did you make these yourself?" Lucy asked. "Oh yes, dear. I made those when Robert and I were first married and had no money for a fancy decorations, just like you and your mum are doing now." As they worked together, hanging garlands round Mrs. Davies' windows and placing ornaments on her small table, something wonderful began to happen. They heard footsteps on the stairs outside, and then another knock at Mrs. Davies' door. It was Mr. Williams from the flat upstairs. He was a tall, thin man who owned the electrical shop on the high street. Emma had always thought he looked rather serious, but now he was smiling broadly. "I heard there was decorating going on down here," Mr. Williams said with a grin that transformed his whole face. "I brought some extra Christmas lights from my shop. They're perfectly good, just items that customers returned because they bought too many. He held up several boxes of twinkling lights, each one a different color. Soon, Mrs. Patterson from the end of the hall arrived with a tray of homemade mince pies and a thermos full of hot chocolate there. Tea smelled like cinnamon and cream. Then young Mr. and Mrs. Foster came down from the top floor, bringing their baby daughter who gurgled and reached for the sparkling decorations with her tiny hands. "It's like a Christmas party." Tom laughed, carefully hanging his homemade paper angel on Mrs. Davies' mantelpiece next to her collection of hand-carved wooden figures. Emma stood in the doorway of Mrs. Davies' flat, watching her children laugh and work alongside these neighbors, who had been strangers just hours before. Her heart felt full in a way it had not felt since David died. These people, who she had only exchanged polite greetings with in the hallway, were opening their hearts to her family. Mrs. Davies appeared beside Emma, moving quietly despite her age, sometimes. "Dear," Mrs. Davies said softly, so only Emma could. "Here, Christmas finds us in the most unexpected ways." Word spread through their small building like ripples in a pond. By afternoon, everyone who lived there had heard about the Christmas decorating happening in Mrs. Davies' flat. And something truly magical began to happen that Emma had never seen before in all the time they had lived there. Mrs. Foster appeared at Mrs. Davies' door carrying a large cardboard box filled with Christmas lights. She was a young woman with kind eyes and a baby who was always balanced on her hip. Her husband, Mr. Foster, followed behind her, carrying more boxes. "We heard you were decorating," Mrs. Foster said with a shy smile. "We bought way too many lights last year and never used them all. Would you like them for the hallway?" Before anyone could answer, Mr. Foster was already unrolling long strings of tiny white lights. "These would look beautiful along the banister of the main staircase," he said, "and we have enough to go round all the doorways too." Mrs. Patterson, who lived at the end of the hall and always wore flowered dresses, brought down her entire collection of candles. She had tall white ones and short red ones and some that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. "We need to place them safely away from anything that could catch fire," she said in her practical voice, "but they will make the windows look so warm and welcoming." Mr. Williams disappeared upstairs to his own flat and came back carrying a bag full of extension cords and electrical supplies from his shop. "Can't have Christmas lights without proper connections," he said, already getting to work. "Safety first, but beauty second." Tom ran from window to window, watching as each one began to glow with warm light. His face was bright with excitement, and he could barely stand still. "Look, Mom," he called out, his voice echoing in the stairwell. "The whole hallway looks like a Christmas wonderland." Emma stepped out of Mrs. Davies' flat and into the main hallway of their building. She had to put her hand over her mouth to stop herself from gasping out loud. In just a few hours, their ordinary, rather shabby building had been completely transformed. Every door now had something special on it. Mrs. Foster had hung a wreath made of pine branches on her door. Mr. Williams had put up a garland made of silver bells. Mrs. Patterson's door was decorated with ribbons in red and gold. Warm light spilled from every window, making the whole building glow like a lantern in the dark December evening. The scent of pine and cinnamon and vanilla candles filled the air, mixing together to create the most wonderful Christmas smell Emma had ever experienced. Lucy was still inside Mrs. Davies' flat, carefully arranging glass ornaments on the windowsill, when she suddenly stopped what she was doing. She had an idea that made her eyes light up with excitement. "Mrs. Davies," Lucy said, turning to the elderly woman, "do you think we could make a special display for everyone to see? Something that shows how we're all connected now." Mrs. Davies set down the ornament she had been holding and looked at Lucy with interest. What a lovely thought. Dear, what did you have in mind? Lucy's words came out in a rush as she explained her idea. She wanted to create something in the main entrance hall of the building. Something that everyone could see when they came home each day. Not just decorations, but something that celebrated all of them as a community. Soon, Lucy was explaining her idea to everyone. Mr. Williams listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. Mrs. Foster bounced her baby gently while she considered what Lucy was suggesting. Mrs. Patterson smiled and clapped her hands together. I think it's a wonderful idea, Mrs. Patterson said. Let's do it. Mr. Williams went to his workshop and came back with a large piece of smooth wood that he had been planning to use for something else. This can be our base, he said, setting it up on a table in the entrance hall. Each family began to contribute something to the display. Mrs. Foster found a camera and took pictures of everyone working together, laughing and decorating. She printed them out right away using her small photo printer. Mrs. Patterson carefully wrote out her grandmother's recipe for Christmas cookies on a piece of beautiful paper decorated with holly leaves. My grandmother always said that recipes were meant to be shared, she explained. Williams used his neat handwriting to make a sign that said "A Building Family" at the top of the wooden board. Each family wrote their names and a special Christmas wish for their neighbors. The Fosters wrote that they hoped everyone would have warm homes and full hearts. Mrs. Patterson wrote that she wished for friendship and laughter to fill their building all year long. Mrs. Davies wrote in her shaky handwriting that she was grateful to have children's voices in the building again after so many years of quiet. Tom worked very carefully to pin his homemade paper angel right in the center of the display. The angel with the wobbly wings and crooked halo looked perfect there, surrounded by all the pictures and messages and decorations. This is from my dad, Tom said proudly, stepping back to look at their creation, so he can see how many friends we have now. Emma felt tears of happiness fill her eyes as she looked at her son's serious face. Tom, I think he can see, she whispered, and I think he's very, very happy. As the evening continued, more wonderful things happened. Mrs. Patterson brought out a pot of tea and shared her homemade biscuits. Mr. Williams told funny stories about customers at his electrical shop. The Fosters let everyone take turns holding their baby, who giggled and reached for the sparkling decorations. Emma sat on the stairs, watching all of this happen round her. She realized that while they still did not have a Christmas tree in their own flat, they had found something even more precious. They had become part of a caring community, a group of people who looked out for each other. Mom, Lucy whispered, sitting down beside her mother on the step. This feels like the most Christmas-like Christmas ever. Emma put her arm round her daughter and pulled her close. It really does. Sweetheart, it really, really does. Christmas morning arrived quietly in Millbrook. Soft white snow was falling outside the windows like tiny dancing feathers. The world looked clean and peaceful, covered in a blanket of fresh snow that made everything sparkle in the early morning. Light. Emma woke up before her alarm clock rang. For the first time in many months, her heart felt light instead of heavy. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the quiet sounds of Christmas morning. She could hear church bells ringing in the distance and the happy voices of children playing in the snow outside. She got up quietly and put on her warm slippers and dressing gown. She wanted to make a special breakfast for Lucy and Tom on Christmas morning. Even though she did not have much food in the kitchen, she would make their favorite pancakes and hot chocolate, and maybe they could pretend it was a feast. But when Emma walked into their small living room to open the curtains, she stopped so suddenly that she nearly dropped the tea towel she was carrying. Lucy and Tom were already awake. They were sitting cross-legged on the floor in their pajamas, But they were not looking sad or disappointed about their empty Christmas morning. Instead, they were smiling at something in the corner of the room. In the corner where the empty space had been for so many days, there was now something beautiful and amazing. Using fallen branches that had been broken off trees during the big storm, Lucy and Tom had built their own Christmas tree. The branches were different sizes and they did not match perfectly, but somehow that made the tree even more special. It looked wild and natural, like a tree that had grown in their living room by magic. The tree was decorated with ornaments, but not the kind that came from expensive shops. Every ornament had been given to them by their neighbors. There were Mrs. Davy's glass balls that caught the morning light and threw little rainbows on the walls. There were silver bells from Mr. Williams that tinkled softly when the air moved them. There were handmade decorations from the Fosters and delicate paper snowflakes from Mrs. Patterson. At the very top of the tree, Tom's paper angel sat proudly. The angel with the wobbly wings and the word Daddy written across its chest looked perfect there, watching over their little family. Strings of tiny lights from the Fosters were wrapped round the branches, twinkling like stars that had come down from the sky to live in their living room. But that was not all. Emma looked at the wall beside their homemade tree and saw something that made her eyes fill with happy tears. Lucy and Tom had created a large poster that covered almost the entire wall. It was covered with photographs, drawings, and notes from every person who lived in their building. Lucy, Tom, Emma whispered, her voice full of wonder. "This is incredible." Lucy jumped up from where she had been sitting and took her mother's hand. "Mrs. Davies helped us think of it," she explained, her eyes bright with excitement. "She came up last night after you went to sleep. She said that the most beautiful trees aren't the ones you buy from shops. They're the ones that grow from love and friendship." Tom scrambled to his feet and ran to the wall display. He pointed to different parts of it with his small finger, eager to show his mother everything they had created. "Look, Mom, here's a picture of all of us decorating together in the hallway, and here's where everyone wrote what they're grateful for. Mrs. Davies wrote that she's grateful we moved into the building because we made her Christmas special again." Emma moved closer to read the messages that their neighbors had written. Each one made her heart feel fuller and warmer. Williams had written in his neat handwriting about how wonderful it was to have the children's laughter echoing through the building again after so many quiet years. The Fosters had drawn a picture of their baby's first Christmas, but in the drawing, they had included all of their neighbors as part of their extended family. Mrs. Patterson had written a long message about how sharing her baking with Lucy and Tom had brought back happy memories of Christmas mornings with her own children, who were now grown up and lived far away. "And look at this pot," Lucy said, pointing to the center of the display where the most important message was written. "We wrote about our real family tree, not just Daddy, but everyone who makes our lives special now." Emma sat down on their old sofa between her two children. She looked round their small living room, which was now filled with warm light and love, and the most beautiful decorations she had ever seen. The tree made from storm branches and decorated with gifts of friendship was more beautiful than any tree she could have bought with money. "You know what I learned this Christmas," Emma said, pulling both Lucy and Tom close to her so she could feel their warm bodies against hers. "The most precious things in life can't be bought with money. They grow when people care for each other." Tom snuggled closer to his mother, breathing in her familiar scent that always made him feel safe. "Do you think Daddy would like our tree?" Emma kissed the top of his head, feeling his soft hair against her lips. "I think Daddy would absolutely love it, sweetheart. And I think he would be so proud of how kind and creative and thoughtful you both are." As they sat together on Christmas morning, surrounded by all the evidence of their neighbors' kindness and their own creativity. Emma realized that this Christmas had taught them something wonderful and important. They had learned that families are not just the people you're born with. They are also the people who choose to care about you and help you and share their lives with you. They had learned that communities are built one small act of kindness at a time. Like adding decorations to a tree or sharing cookies with a neighbor. They had learned that the most beautiful celebrations come not from expensive things, but from sharing whatever you have with the people around you. The Christmas tree they could not afford to buy had been replaced by something that money could never purchase. They now had a network of people who cared about them, and the knowledge that they were never truly alone in the world. Later that morning, their neighbors began knocking on doors to visit each other with small homemade gifts and warm Christmas wishes. Emma sat at her kitchen table and wrote in the journal that Lucy had made for her as a Christmas present. This was the Christmas we learned that the most beautiful trees aren't the ones you buy. She wrote, they're the ones that grow from human kindness and community love.